Greetings from Houston, Texas, guys. Mike coming at you from AT Astro, Era of Truth, Aspect, and Relationship Astrology. And despite my long hiatus, I am back at you with another fascinating astrological segment. And today we're talking relationships again, but we're going to be talking about how it's important to check over a person's individual wants and needs in a relationship before jumping into full relationship analysis. I'm talking about examining the natal chart and finding out what a person is looking for and what they find attractive in another person, and issues within themselves that are going to come up through relating to another person. So, before you jump into doing synastry analysis or a composite analysis of two people and determining how a relationship is going to go, it's very important that you check out how they will react in a relationship and what types of relationships are going to be attractive to them. There are a couple things that you need to pay very close attention to grasp this fact. You're going to need to look at the cusp of the seventh house, the ruler of the seventh house. You need to look at the ruler of the cusp of the fifth house. You need to find out the state of the individual's moon and the state of their Venus. And if you want to go farther into it, you can check out Juno as well. Juno's a very important relationship asteroid as well. Okay, so the moon represents nurturing, or how a person reacts to their immediate environment in an emotional way. It represents more of their innermost feelings, the part that they don't always show to the world, just depending on the house and the aspects for that particular individual. But especially in a man's chart, you want to see that individual, the state of their moon, like a man or even a woman who has a lot of hard aspects being made from Venus, Saturn, or Pluto to the moon. It can give them a difficult perspective in terms of how they deal with a maternal nurturing figure, the mother, or whoever they received nurturing from whenever they were a child, an infant. And you're going to want to find somebody that matches their moon or exemplifies a lot of the traits that their moon embodies. So, like, let's say somebody might have their moon in the really, really sensitive sign of Pisces, but if that moon in Pisces falls into the third house, a much more intellectual, conversative, playful house, friendship-oriented house, it's going to really tone down some of the emotional sensitivity that they're going to display in a relationship, just due to the fact that the house is the filter with which the moon generally expresses itself. If you're seeing somebody that has Pluto making a lot of hard aspects to relationship planets, Venus or the moon, then they're generally going to have these issues play themselves out in their day-to-day relationships. The same thing if Pluto is making an aspect to the ruler of the seventh house. The ruler of the seventh house is very important because the seventh house represents a lot about the other person, the other half, the missing half to the whole individual, as shown in the natal chart. So, like, let's say, for instance, my ascendant's in Gemini, so the descendant would fall at the opposite end of the wheel in Sagittarius. So that would make the ruler of my seventh house Jupiter. You take the ruler of the seventh house, and you find out what house it sits in. And that gives you a lot of clues as to the type of people, where the relationship that this person's seeking out is going to come from. So, let's say Jupiter would fall into the ninth house. The ruler of the seventh house and the ninth house. That means that person's generally going to be looking for somebody from a different cultural background, from far away, or somebody that embodies mind-expanding principles to that individual. So finding love in a foreign land is going to be very a prominent theme throughout this person's life and their relationships, exotic relationships. Mine, for instance, would fall in the fourth house, and the fourth house has a lot to do with your cultural background, where you came from. So having the ruler of the seventh house in the fourth house, for me, has generally meant being more attracted to people who exemplify cultural traits that I grew up with. So somebody from my hometown, somebody from the same ethnic or racial background, things of that nature. You also want to see what aspects are being made to the seventh house ruler. So if there is a very, very close aspect being made to your seventh house ruler from another planet, you're going to look for somebody who embodies a lot of the traits of the planet that's being made, that's having an aspect made to your seventh house ruler. Mine would be Mars is the closest aspect. It's Mars square Jupiter. So somebody with Martian aspects, somebody who's very, very forward in their way of getting and doing things. That's going to be a very common trait that you will notice in your relationships with with the other person. Also, it's really interesting to note that many people with hard aspects in their natal chart, especially from like Pluto to a personal planet, or Jupiter to a personal planet, or Saturn to a personal planet, they're going to be very attracted to somebody who has the same issues but with a corresponding planet of the opposite gender. For example, somebody who has hard aspects being made from Pluto to Venus, let's say a man who has hard aspects being made from Pluto to Venus, they are going to have a tendency to attract women who have a hard aspect being made from Mars to Pluto, as I've noticed. Same thing, like let's say, you see some, like I've actually had a tendency with having a hard aspect from Mars to Jupiter, have attracted people that have had a hard aspect from Jupiter to Venus. It's almost a complementary issue. It's like you have this issue, and then this person has a similar issue that's different, but still complementary to the issue that you have. So it's kind of like sickness attracts sickness. It sounds kind of messed up, but through that, we are subconsciously trying to work out our own issues by finding an issue in another person that mirrors our own issue so that we can then work through it. If you see somebody whose Venus is making hard aspects to slower moving planets, they're going to be also attracted to composite charts that mirror those aspects. Like somebody who has a lot of Pluto hitting personal planets, they're going to be subconsciously trying to work out that Pluto energy. So they're going to, usually when they're younger, be attracted to relationships with a heavy Plutonic theme, because Pluto is all about, the death and rebirth of the consciousness of the emotional nature, and you're going to have to go through a period of, letting out all that repressed fear and rage out, and a lot of times you will do it through another partner. You also want to look at aspects that are being made to the descendant as well. Like, let's say somebody has a lot of planets in the seventh house. They're going to, conjunct the descendant, or just in the seventh house in general, because it is a very sensitive house. That person's going to attempt to work out the energies of that planet through another person. So somebody with Mars in the seventh house is going to generally try to take the lead in their relationships, or they're going to look for somebody who exemplifies a lot of Martian traits within their relationships as well. The fifth house is important too, because the fifth house has a lot to do with sex, because the fifth house is very much about creative energy, and what's one of the best, most basic, most animalistic ways that a person can express themselves? Through sex. So, it's not as much of a commitment-related house. It's not as much to do with like the long-term partner, but it will have a lot to do with what you find attractive. So you find out where the cusp of the fifth house lays, and you look at that planet, and you find out what that planet's doing. And so, like, for instance, you see somebody with the ruler of their fifth house, let's say it's Mercury. Let's say it falls in the 11th house, and the 11th house has a lot to do with the internet and networking. That person may find a lot of enjoyment, sexual enjoyment, in finding partners online, or dealing with people through the internet. And it's just very interesting. You have to start to break down what somebody's looking for, what somebody's into, and relationship astrology is very complex. What people are looking for in a partner is very complex. So it's a lot more than just checking out the synastry between two people, or checking out the composite chart between two people. You also want to look at Venus and see what Venus is doing, because Venus is very much about how a person gives and receives affection. And by finding out what house that planet falls in, you can get a good view of what that person, or how they usually express and give love in a way that's most comfortable to them. Somebody with like their Venus in the fourth house, for example, is going to be much more of like the, because the fourth house is such an emotional, homey, touchy, comforty kind of like, a grandma's house type of feeling. It's going to be somebody who will express most of their affection through a comfortable setting that makes them sort of feel, I guess, infantile in a way. So like at the house, or on the couch with a bunch of blankets, and anyway, but So this concludes my segment of delineating a relationship preferences within the natal chart, and I will be actually doing a second video to sort of go further into depth on certain placements. But I hope this was helpful. Feel free to contact me. I do offer consultations. You can PM me or check out AT Astro, my YouTube channel, where I will be posting more videos. And it's been a pleasure. Hopefully this was helpful.